Back in February 2000, Maxis and Electronic Arts released The Sims, the one and only life simulation game where players could create their own characters and build them a house while playing God, whether that was a kind or a menacing one. The boundaries of what you could do were limitless, and the game was extremely well received, having sold more than 6.3 million copies worldwide, and having a staggering amount of expansion packs for the time. From here we've been introduced to Sims 2, 3 and 4, with Sims 5 being announced recently under the name Project Renee. For the longest time there was only one live sim game on the market, and The Sims absolutely dominated, with there now being an entire community that have followed the franchise for many years. But now things are starting to change, with new simulation games appearing on the horizon such as Life by You and Paralives, that have caused quite a stir in the simulation game genre, and seem to have lit a fire with a couple of players, who for the first time are considering a competitor and moving away from The Sims. But why is this? So let's go back to the beginning of how the Sims franchise started. Game designer Will Wright had already had success in designing games such as Sim Earth, SimCity and SimCopter. It's fair to say the man had a soft spot for simulation games. It wasn't until 1991, when Wright lost his home in the Oakland firestorm, that inspired him to use the experience of rebuilding his own life into a game. He started working on the idea of a virtual dollhouse, utilising his knowledge from SimCity, but with more of a focus on the individual people. Once he had this idea in place, he developed a concept. Wright brought it to the board at Maxis, however they weren't interested, but he did find an unlikely publisher willing to take on the opportunity, Electronic Arts, who were already familiar with Wright's work on SimCity and its success. And like they say, that was where it began. Upon release, The Sims quickly became the best-selling computer game of all time, because the kind of gameplay was unlike anything ever seen before. It was totally groundbreaking, and the success led to a number of expansions, following the same formula, each one offering something new and exciting. Following on from The Sims 1's success, then came Sims 2, which many say was the best game out of the entire franchise. Sims 2 brought a new layer to the theme by trading in the traditional isometric perspective to making the game fully 3D. Along with this, they also added aspirations, age progression, more genetics, and so much more. They essentially just took everything that made the first game great and built upon that as a foundation to make it excellent. Then we were introduced to Sims 3, which once again raised the bar for what Simmers were expecting, moving from a fixed house to an entirely open world you could move around in. We were also introduced to new ways of playing, such as introducing a colour wheel, allowing you to bring your visions to life in any game object. Then in 2013 it was confirmed that Maxis were busy working on the next game, Sims 4. As with the other instalments, the franchise fans were over the moon as the company teased that players would be able to unleash their imaginations, create truly unique Sims with distinct appearances, and explore a vibrant world. They would have true emotions influenced by the world around them and a brand new way of building houses. So then the release date came along, people flooded digital and physical stores, they installed it, started it up, and that's where things started to go wrong. Upon starting the game, players were met with a small grey, flat map, which was a huge contrast to the colourful and detailed open world they had become accustomed to in the previous games. But this wasn't the only thing players were unhappy with. The base game also launched without toddler life stages, pools, burglars, a colour wheel. I could go on, but from a first impression, the game was incredibly stripped back and had removed some of the key features that had made the game iconic from the very start. And fans were confused why these things weren't included upon launch. It was almost like developers had just removed a huge part of the game that many players understandably expected to be included. Then there was the actual emotions of the Sims themselves. The idea of a Sim's emotions influencing how they interact with the world was a good one. For example, an inspired Sim would have an easier time when playing an instrument, or an angry Sim would treat others around them worse because they were having a bad day. However, this wasn't the case. The system was clunky, with Sims switching motions faster than the weather and bugs running rampant. Remember that Sims having weirder stories and more complex behaviours was a major selling point EA used to bring people in when advertising the game prior to launch. So of course this would be a focus for players going into the game for the first time. And unfortunately for me, the game committed the biggest sin of all. I found it boring, and judging from what I see on YouTube and Reddit, I wasn't the only one. For me, the game, which had once brought so much joy and excitement, had just become lifeless, and unfortunately when you have 3 amazing games which had already been released, it puts more pressure under Sims 4. The number of videos revolved around things to do in Sims 4 when you're bored is absolutely insane. So what went wrong on launch? Well, for that we have to go back to the development stage and where it all began. SimCity was launched in 2013 and was released as an online multiplayer game. The reception wasn't great. Players were disappointed for a number of reasons, from the size of the land plots they got to an engine with technical issues, and the fact the game always had to have an online connection just to play. But there's a silver lining to everything, as the failure of SimCity directly influenced the creation of City Skylines, so I suppose there's a small victory there. But it was so bad that players were even offered refunds. So what has SimCity got to do with Sims 4? Well, that was actually the baseline for another game EA had in the works called Project Olympus, which was set to be a different type of Sims game that would also be online. However, from the disaster SimCity had with its launch and the reception of online play, EA went back to the drawing board, and instead of launching Project Olympus, they transformed it into Sims 4. How do we know this? Well, the timing was one thing. SimCity was released in 2013 and Sims 4 announced 2014, which is a very strange coincidence. Since launch, more information has come out on Project Olympus to confirm this, and if so much time and money had already gone into a project from a business perspective, it makes sense to package it up rather than bin it and start from scratch. So that's perhaps an explanation why Sims 4 had such a rough launch, and why it was such a stripped down version of the game we love, with no pools, toddlers or hot tubs. But let's move on. The Sims franchise has always introduced expansions and additions to add to the base game, to expand the world and enhance gameplay. Sims 1 had 7 expansions with a huge amount of content to work with. Other Sims games gradually started increasing the number of expansions and even adding categories of content such as stuff packs or kits, which were more bite-sized add-ons for your game. The reception to expansion packs was usually met positively. However, this started to change with Sims 3, where the community was starting to grumble about the amount of add-on content. But this was only the beginning, because the amount of DLC from Sims 3 was nothing compared to Sims 4, which at this time has 71 expansion packs and kits in total. That would mean if you were to buy all of these, you would be looking at over £1,000. A huge amount for one game, and fans have been pushing back on this for quite some time, and for good reason. If we compare to previous games, let's use Sims 3 as an example with the Pets expansion. In this pack, players were able to create, customise and add cats, dogs, horses and other small animals to their families at long last. Pets could be taught tricks, had a bunch of different interaction with their sim owners, with dedicated parts and objects to add in their household. We even got a brand new world called Appaloosa Plains with some additional hair and clothing items as well. The pack was well received, with sources giving it a 7.5 out of 10 on average. Now let's compare this to Sims 4 expansions with animals, and yes, I did use that as a plural on purpose. The first was Sims 4 Cats and Dogs, which was the 4th pack released in 2017. It gave players exactly as you might expect: cats and dogs, a new world, some objects, and the veterinary career path. Again, this was met very positively, but as you might have noticed, this entire pack only includes cats and dogs. Horses were introduced in 2023 in a separate Horse Ranch DLC, which has received mixed reviews, with many players being annoyed that the pack had been split, meaning you would need to purchase both in order to get the full experience you had from Sims 3. When you add in again a stuff pack in 2018 called My First Pet, which introduced furry critters, and you could only play this if you already owned the Cats and Dogs expansion, you can understand why players got mad, since you had an expansion for your expansion. But why split packs up like this? The simple answer is money. Why give all your content away in one go if you can split it up and milk your audience for all they're worth? Just to put that into perspective, The Sims 3 Pets cost about £30 to £40 on launch, whereas the same content in Sims 4, you're looking at a rough total of £79. That's an increase of 216%, so it's no surprise people have been upset and lost trust with the company over this amount of time. And while I understand companies need to make money, this approach with add-ons just seems plain greedy. In addition to this, many packs and kits that have been released are often incredibly buggy. Now, bugs are part of any game. However, it's frustrating for fans to purchase a game pack or expansion only to discover that it was essentially unfinished. The best example of this was probably My Wedding Stories. Weddings are a huge part of The Sims, with players liking to plan their perfect day, so when this pack was released there was a huge buzz around it, only to discover it was a complete mess. With bugs such as Sims cutting the cake when they weren't supposed to, timing issues with wedding dates being moved, guests not obeying the dress code, guests not sitting down during the ceremony, I could go on. Now, having some odd behaviour is normal for a Sims game, and often it can make the experience a bit more fun, but this was an entire game pack revolved completely around weddings. So the expectation that it should at least be playable is reasonable, and even now we are still having packs, kits and expansions released with the same issues. Sims 4 for Rent, for example, being the latest release at this time, has numerous forum posts with errors such as tenants not paying, price changes and general glitches. At this stage, with 70 packs in, it's no surprise that fans have lost trust with the franchise. So with all this information and outrage, why hasn't the company gone under? Well, the answer is because The Sims dominates the simulation genre world. For over 20 years, there's been nothing even close to rival the huge franchise that EA have built on this IP, leaving fans with no choice but to purchase the editions. But now for the first time, we know that that's not going to stay that way for very long, because on the horizon there are some new contenders which may give The Sims a competitor at long last. Most of you are probably already aware of the numerous life simulation games looking to be released. For the sake of keeping things simple, I'll focus on the top two that have caused the most excitement. Life by You is a game in development by Paradox, which boasts an open world filled with creative possibilities where you'll be able to generate and be in control of humans. The company are pretty active on social media and have released a number of videos showing the early development and gameplay, which looks promising. But the reason Life by You is so interesting is the team behind it. Rod Humble is the person leading Paradox Interactive's new studio since March 2019. However, prior to this, he was the executive vice president and head of the Sims label of Electronic Arts, where he worked on The Sims 2 and 3. And you can definitely see his influence in Life by You, with the game art style still being very reminiscent of Sims 3. But we also know that Life by You still wants to have a positive relationship with the simming community and give power back to the player. Open up a new world of creative possibilities in Life by You, be in control of the humans that you create, the towns that you build and the stories you tell. Oh, and yes, mods. We know life is always better with a heavy sprinkle of your imagination, so we're empowering you with the wide variety of creator tools so you can design your lives the way you see fit or break the rules of life itself. Designed to be one of the most moddable and open life simulation games, we look forward to the humans, stories and creations that you'll make with Life by You. So with the information we've got so far, the game looks promising, with much of its content already being included in the base game such as cars, so I'd highly recommend checking out their development videos where they go into a bit more detail about the gameplay and what to expect. Paralives has been in development since 2019 and is another contender to take on the Sims franchise. The game started as a solo project and is entirely funded by its community of fans on Patreon. As of now, the project has over 7,000 patrons and is bringing in an average of 27,000 a month. Paralives has rapidly gained popularity due to the customization options they've shown in their videos, some of which haven't been seen in a life simulation game before. So far we've seen curved walls, sliders for parafolk creation, colour wheels, flexible sized items such as tables or beds, and much more. While in early development, we still don't have a trailer and there isn't much gameplay to go on, but that should change in the near future. I've linked the Paralives Patreon below, along with a link to Life by You if you'd like to learn more about these games. In summary, we've got a little ways to go with waiting for these to come out and be developed, but I'm curious to know what you guys think. Personally, I think there is still time for Sims 4 to be saved, and to build trust back with its community. However, with the experience many were put through with the launch and subsequent updates, Electronic Arts really need to have a long look at the Sims franchise, and think how they can better serve the players that fund them with more varied content, polished expansions and support. There are of course other Sim Life games out there as well to be released, which I haven't gone into much detail about, but do feel free to check those out as well. I'm looking forward to seeing how these other games will integrate into the market, and I think it's really great news for any individuals who love the life sim genre. What do you think of the upcoming games, and do you still play The Sims 4? I'm curious to know what you think. Remember to give this video a like, comment and subscribe. This is the first long form deep dive I've done on this channel, so I'm curious to know if it's something you like or you want more of, or not. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.